For more content like this, please hit like and subscribe. No, Constantine didn't edit the Bible. A scholar, a manuscript, and a monastery say otherwise. You have probably heard the claim, maybe from a best selling novel or viral video, that Emperor Constantine rewrote the Bible, that he decided what books to include and which ones to toss out, that the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD was the moment Christianity was hijacked by empire. It's a popular theory, but is it true? Recently, I stood at the edge of a cliff at Meteora, Greece, where ancient monasteries rise like fortresses into the sky. While filming there among the stone walls and echoing chants, I realized no emperor, no matter how powerful, could have edited the New Testament. Not Constantine, not anyone. And let me show you why. First, the timeline doesn't work. According to biblical scholar Bruce Metzger, the New Testament canon wasn't determined by emperor's decree. It emerged through a long process of recognition and use across the early church. By the time Constantine convened the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD, the essential structure of the New Testament, the four Gospels, the Acts of the Apostles, and the letters of Paul, were already widely acknowledged and used in worship, teaching, and preaching. But here's what destroys the myth completely. The Codex Sinaiticus, dated somewhere between 325 and 360, this is the earliest complete manuscript of the New Testament in Greek. It contains all 27 books and that are in the modern New Testament. It was not created by Rome, but likely in Egypt or Caesarea, well beyond the reach of imperial micromanagement. The Codex reflects what was already received as scripture. For Constantine to have altered the text, he would have needed to track down and replace thousands of manuscripts already copied by hand and dispersed across a vast and diverse Christian world. Number two, the monks were there before the council. This is where my visit to Meteora changed the way I saw the question. The monasteries we see today, those beautiful cliff perch structures, began to take shape in the 9th century, but the monks themselves had already been there for centuries. By the early 4th century, the very time Constantine came to power, Christian monasteries had already spread across the Roman world. The desert fathers like Anthony the Great were living in Egypt. Pachomius had founded the first monasteries and communities in Cappadocia, Syria, the Greek world, in Ethiopia. Small bands of monks were retreating from cities to dedicate themselves to prayer, study, and copying the scriptures. These communities were remote, decentralized, and fiercely independent. They didn't take orders from bishops, much less emperors, and they had no centralized control, no way for one person, a council, or emperor to standardize or sanitize the scriptures they copied, maintained, preserved, and disseminated. It would have been impossible for Constantine to reach them, let alone command them to adopt new texts or discard old ones. Even if he had tried, he would have faced a wall of silence, not obedience. As I walked through the Meteora libraries where scriptures were copied and preserved by hand, I saw what Metzger meant when he said the canon was not imposed but received. These monks preserved the Bible not because they were ordered to, but because they loved it. 3. There was no central Bible to edit. Before the printing press, there was no single bound Bible to edit. Scripture existed in hundreds of handwritten manuscripts in Greek, Latin, Syriac, Coptic, and many, many more languages. Different churches preserved different books, but the core was consistent and deviations were easy to spot. The early church was not centralized, it was networked. That meant any change to the biblical text would have stood out immediately. There was simply no mechanism, though, by which Constantine or any ruler could have altered the entire body of Scripture. And when we compare pre-Nicene manuscripts to what we have today, we find remarkable consistency. The message hasn't changed. The canon has held. The Gospels still tell the same story. Paul preaches Christ crucified and risen. So why do people still believe this? Why do they believe that Constantine chose our Bible? Well, the myth is attractive. A corrupt emperor, a secret council, lost books, and censored truth. It plays like a movie script. But it misunderstands both history and the strength of the early Christian community. Constantine did not control the Bible because he couldn't. The story of the New Testament is not one of suppression, but of faithfulness through persecution, exile, copying, and preservation. A final word from the cliffs. As I stood in a silent Meteora chapel surrounded by icons and century-old stone, I understood something deeper than footnotes and historical facts. The survival of the Bible is not a story of an emperor's control, it's the story of a people's devotion. The monks didn't obey Constantine, they obeyed Christ. They didn't preserve Scripture because it was convenient, they preserved it because it was true. And that's why we still have it. For the rest of this video, I'll leave you with some additional footage from some of the monasteries in Meteora. They're quite beautiful, they're quite extraordinary. I will point out as you look, you may have seen at the beginning of the video that we walked up stairs. Those stairs were added during the modern period. The first monks who inhabited these places literally scaled up hundreds of feet, straight up rock wall. They were some of the first rock climbers and were extraordinarily courageous and clever for being able to do so. Then, after they began to establish monasteries there, they established a pulley system, and you still had to have quite a lot of courage to use this, but they would pull you up by a basket if you were a welcomed guest. Again, only in modern times were stairs erected and the walls formed or formatted so that visitors like me could visit. Well, anyway, I hope you enjoyed this footage.